Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. Kyle is out once more, and so Jay decided to go even more international. Oh, last time we were international too, weren't we, Lucas? We had you in Germany.
Well, you told everyone to go and message Kyle not to come back so I could stay on, and apparently they did, because Kyle didn't come back for another week.
Yeah, and so we decided to keep this international flavor going, and we've booted out Canada, and we've brought in the United Kingdom. We have Andy all the way from England.
Well, we are ranked higher, so
yep,
it's a good choice. Good choice.
Yep. I think so too. Yeah, I mean, this is the competitive podcast. Might as well bring on somebody competitive.
Yep, you got to bring in the best of the best, and Canada's in 6th, so you might as well bring in number 4.
Yep, that's right. That's right. So we're here. We're gonna talk about a bunch of different stuff today, but we're gonna talk about the Ewoks releases. They're actually up for pre-order, and I called it. It's a July release. So we have those for pre-order on our website. We're gonna get into depth on that. We're going to talk about international affairs today. And no, I don't mean the coronation. We're actually going to talk about the international meta and what Legion looks like abroad. And then our own Lucas here wrote a pretty interesting article that, Lucas, I have to say, was super annoying, only from the sheer fact is I generally don't pay attention to the articles you guys write, except for this one got so many comments and it just kept like dinging and dinging and dinging. And like, I was like, what are this person commented on your post? I'm like, what post? And it was your article. So it got a lot of comments. So that's good. Yeah. And so I think we're going to cover all of that today. But before we start, Andy, why don't you tell the folks at home about, not only do you write for our blog, but there's something else that you do.
Yeah, so I'm hoping you're hinting at the podcast that over in the UK. We do a podcast called That's No Moon, where it's less PG than here. I'll definitely say that for sure. We don't swear, but we do like to take the mick out of each other quite a lot. Especially with the other co-host Cockles, who is our less competitive, or we thought he was less competitive since he managed to come 4th at a 2-day event this weekend. So he's definitely better than we thought he was.
He's number one in my heart. Cockles is number one in my heart.
Myself, Cockles, and Ollie Dyer are. We try to speak about the UK and European meta. We've obviously had Lucas on in the past. We've had people from Poland, Germany. We've had quite a bit of a mix, and we try and keep it European.
You haven't had me on.
We have.
No, you haven't. You definitely haven't. I would remember if I was on your podcast.
Nope, we didn't have you. We had Evan Paul. That's it. Yeah.
All you Americans look the same, right?
Oh, well, that's an official invite for you, Lucas. You can come on out.
What you meant to say was you had the real doctor on your podcast.
Yeah, that's an embarrassing there, isn't it? So yeah, we
that's funny.
We try and take it from semi-competitive, with me and Ollie being quite hyper-competitive, and Cockles being kind of a bit like the J, really, keeping us straight and narrow, but doing what he wants to do best. So yeah, if you want something different and a bit more European, then give us a listen. I appreciate it.
I definitely would say I'm glad you guys are doing that. I'm glad there's a bunch of international podcasts because I think that's a complaint. One of the many complaints we get about this podcast is that we don't have a huge connection to the rest of the world as far as the meta and stuff like that. And my answer is always, well, because none of us play in Europe. So how can I have any insight onto what the meta is over there?
In the nicest way possible. It's why we started. I had lots of feedback saying, "Oh, I listened to Fifth Trooper, but that's not the same over here. Like us, no, we don't have Shadow. No one plays Shadow Collective. Like they might be strong, but no one plays them. So that's why we started up. And due to the Fifth Troop Discord, I saw there's the Australian one. I've added that to my playlist to listen to on my way into work. So I'm looking forward to listening to that this week.
Yeah. That Discord is available to Patreon members, and we actually had a podcast, After Dark podcast, that Andy and Lucas have been joining me on for several weeks, where we talk about sometimes Legion, but sometimes we also get into an hour's worth of AI, and Jay trying to make himself immortal through AI, and Lucas explaining the the inner workings of how AI actually functions. So that was our last podcast. I think we talked about traveling abroad and the big differences, and then Halloween, and I don't know. We got into a bunch of stuff, but that's After Dark.
Yeah,
that's not this podcast. So, but yeah, so please go have a listen to Andy's podcast. They do a great job, and if you want to know what the European flavor of Legion is, that's probably your best bet. So, all right. Well, let's talk about Ewoks, the best units to ever arrive to these shores ever. Basically what we've had some, so last week we talked about they spoiled
the new card we talked about. Yeah.
Right, they spoiled the core card in the what was it, the World's Regionals packages, right? And then we finally got pre-orders for the ATST, the core units, and the commander packs. And so we've got some more views of cards. I think specifically one card, right? Just the ATST Chewbacca.
The
card?
ATST, I think, is the main new card. You can we already saw C-3PO, and there's a Princess Leia command card that you can also see.
Yeah.
A Wicket Leia one.
Yeah, with teamwork, but you can't really see what it doesn't mean anything. So I guess we'll just go over the ATST one. So let's see. What is it? How many points is that?
It's 180, 190, I think is what I'm seeing around.
190. Let me see if I can find a more zoomed in photo of it.
Zoom.
I think most people have signed it on 190.
Enhance. Speaking of AI, I could just throw it into Dolly and have it sharpen it for me. The image AI.
Yeah, it looks like 190. I guess we put it into Legion HQ as 190, which is interesting.
I think that's about right.
Because the Empire one is 155.
Yeah, but you do have some special things, right?
Right. Okay, yeah. So 190. It actually is interestingly enough, doesn't have any symbol, so it's a mercenary unit,
like Shadow Collective, right?
Yep. So that's interesting. If you want to have two, you would have to, in a rebels list, you would have to have
you can't. It has the little dot. It's
Chewbacca.
Does
it? Oh, right.
Yep,
that's right.
It's also got the tree blight is the symbol for it as well.
Oh, the teardrop,
the little teardrop thing.
Yeah,
the prison teardrop. Yeah,
it's only for that battle force.
Right. Oh,
yeah. So it'd probably be like how Maul and the Mandos, right, were just in the battle force.
Yeah.
Same thing. They had no logos, faction logos, but they had affiliation logo.
Yeah, that's the word, affiliation.
Yeah, it's I don't know if this is a complaint, but just kind of an observation. Like with all these new, like, if you're a new player and you're not online or using the list building tools, I could see where this gets a little convoluted with all like, okay, well, it has this symbol and it doesn't have these two symbols where these two gray dots are. So that means, you know what I mean? It's a little convoluted, but it's okay.
I think they should have kept with like 4 blank symbols, because it is weird that some have 2 and some have 4.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree on that. Like, I think they should have just 4 because there's 4 main factions.
Right.
So yeah.
And just leave them blank. You know, like it seems like a lot of work for the graphic design. So as someone who has done graphic design, that's a lot of work. Like I have to have like 5 different templates for depending on what, you know what I mean? It's a lot to keep track of and a lot to make mistakes on. And so anyways, I do
should we
not.
talk about the weapon profiles?
Yes. Yeah, we can get there. We can get there. You want to start there? Is that what you want?
But talk about mistakes.
Yeah.
Go on.
So we'll fly through it all, I guess, real fast. But it's 190, Arsenal 2, armor.
Yep.
Something that the other ATST doesn't have is it has Inspire 3
Yep.
and Incognito, which is insane. 11 health, white surging saves. 8 is the breaking threshold. It has surge to critical, which the other ATST has no surge. And then built into it, it has the main 1 to 4 gun that the other ATST does, the twin blaster cannon. It has the twin light cannon, which in this case is melee to range 2 or 3, depending on which box you're looking at. So if you look at the ATST box, it says melee to range 2. And then if you look at the Wicket box, it's melee to range 3. Yeah. I assume it's 3 because that gun is range 3 on the Imperial ATST. But we'll have to see because there's currently 2 versions of the card floating around. And then the grenade launcher, which is melee to range 2, 2 blacks with blast. So it's more expensive than the other ATSD, but it has Inspire, Incognito, Surge, Crit, and 2 of the armaments already equipped.
Built in. Yeah. I mean, and I'm okay. Like, I like that they didn't put a thematically, I guess. I like that they don't have a communications upgrade on it, so you can't put link targeting array on it, which is one of the best things to ever put on a heavy vehicle like this. But I understand thematically why it doesn't allow for that.
Yeah, so to compare it to an ATST with the elite armor pilot, grenade launcher, and twin light, that's 183 points. So for 7 points, you're getting an upgrade from surge to hit to surge to crit, Inspire 3, and Incognito, and then both of your guns can also be used in melee. So that's a 7-point difference for some pretty solid keywords.
Yeah.
So for the Incognito, like for 7 points, I don't see, other than the fact that they can't shoot you until you've shot, I don't see the other benefit, because you can move and shoot later in the turn and you're always going to be on full health. You haven't got to worry about if you're facing a mega heavy like anti-armor list that they can't shoot you. But like, is there any other real benefit? Because the other 5 turns they can still shoot you.
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe you want to be like a really aggressive ATST at range 2 with blast, you can leave up Incognito and just double move turn 1, double move turn 2, and then turn 3 start blasting stuff. It's a way to get the ATST up close without them being able to do anything about it.
But you wanted to spend 190 points for that.
No, I think the other benefit, I think too, depending on, we kind of know what the core units do, but depending on how the rest of the units work out and what the makeup of the, battle force is going to be, I could potentially see, because a lot of times what happens, especially when you only have one ATST, is it gets plinked a lot from like range 4 with range 4 critical and stuff. So I could see it being a benefit of kind of putting your Ewoks into position and kind of holding down positions and then not getting plinked on your big weapon until like turn 3 or 4, when you can then move in, like if Lucas is trying to take a middle objective and I'm just kind of holding until he actually gets all his units up there, and then he can't shoot the ATST, so then I can just like step up and start like murdering things and still have full health.
Yeah, I mean, it's since it's a long range unit, unlike someone like K2SO, I think it is kind of a nombo, like you're saying, so you do want to shoot at range 4. But I think there'll be situations, like you said, with something like Intercept or even potentially KP, where you just want to walk the ATST up, have it sit there and be like, come to me.
And I guess with the new changes for line of sight as well, thinking about it in hindsight, that you could use it, that it's a permanent line of sight blocker.
Yeah.
So
that they can't shoot.
Yeah. So if you compare it to like Lila's bus, where she uses that as a protector for as long as possible to keep her units behind to move up the board. So you've got a mega melee aggressive Ewok force because they're cheaper. then you've got an ATST that doesn't have to shoot, and you've now got a portable two height 2 building essentially, right? Like if you build it at full scale, it's pretty big. It's maybe it's better than I think for 7 points.
I think so. I think it's I really feel like, and I think it's going to be dependent on what the other, because I think there's 2 core units. I think ones are like spears and ones are whatever they're called there,
slingers or something like that.
Slingshots or something, right? And so I think just having those options with like your real centerpiece, because I'm assuming there isn't going to be any other like in the battle force vehicles that are going to be available, to that battle force. So having your big centerpiece just have options as far as what it can do on the battlefield, I think is going to be really good with this squad.
I want speeder bikes of Ewoks.
See, I want mounted heroes. How cool. I know we have Chewbacca as a mounted hero. Imagine like Luke Skywalker on a speeder bike.
So good.
But with no lightsaber though. Like otherwise I will have nightmares.
Because I guess he never uses it when he's on the speeder bike, right?
No.
That's what I'm hoping. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but that'd be so cool.
Well, and
lightsaber in there.
I really think this was such a smart way to do it. Like re-release the product, the ATST. I'm hoping that they updated it, a little bit and made some tweaks to the mold and stuff. Maybe it's on frames now, we don't know, but maybe it's a little bit better of a product. And then you can add pilots, like, so the ATST has Chewbacca and General Vice as optional pilots,
and
and
their
so,
models also now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's really cool.
They're not just cards; they're physical models that go on it.
So imagine doing the same thing with the speeder bikes. Like if you release Luke and Leia on speeder bikes, and you just make it as the same dual pack, and you can swap out, the people riding it, and it comes with some extra cards. I think it's great.
Yeah, because this is a super cool way to add in Chewbacca, right? He gives it Inspire, Surge to Crit, but it's still an ATST in the end, so it's not like they don't have to fully redesign a unit. They can just give a new flavor, and then it's a one-off in a specific battle force. So, maybe Incognito ends up being more busted than we realized, but it's a one-off unit. So it's not like you're going to ruin the entire game, right?
Well, and I think the other really nice thing that I'll give them credit for is they also put the Chewbacca ATST card in the commander box, so that you don't, if like me, I'm going to get this ATST as well, but I already have 5.
He needs that 6th.
Why do you have 5?
All right, this is why. I have the first one I got with the core set, or the first wave, not with the core set, but the first wave. And it was my first one. I didn't do a great paint job on it. I just got it together to kind of like use it, right? I got a second one because I wanted to redo the paint job, but at the time ATSTs weren't great and we were moving away from vehicles, so I turned that one into terrain. Then then when ATSTs started getting better again, I was like, oh yeah, I want to do 2 that are matching. So I bought 2 new ones. They were on sale somewhere, and I heavily modded one and put lights in it, and I actually cut a pilot. I used the pilot from the Gav tank, and I put him on top of it, and then I have 2 like shore troopers sitting in it, and like I have a whole story, and it's heavily modified. So that's why I have 5.
I mean, at least you're making each one individual and different, and
And
worth the effort.
And then this one I'll start all over again because it's got to have its own flavor,
I mean, just putting the Chewbacca on the top is perfectly good enough.
Yeah. I mean, the real problem, honestly, is that we're a reseller for Legion. So I get it at cost now, and it's also a business expense.
Boss's perks.
Yeah. So, when they always talk about the drug dealers, doing their own supply, that's me.
Little do you all know that Jay just started the 5th trooper in the store just to feed his hobby,
just to get stuff at cost. Yeah.
Didn't want to do a podcast, just wanted to make it cheaper for him.
Yeah. But no, I think yeah. So I'll definitely get the next one, do another one. But
Yeah.
you know,
I think if once I've seen someone buy it with the molds, and if they are different enough or more detailed, then I'll be more inclined. Because
Yeah.
at the moment, for me, the only benefit is the Chewbacca or General Ice, like
Yeah.
riding out the top, and I think that is a good enough reason. But when I'm paying 60 quid or $60-$70, whatever it is, over for you guys, then it's less of an inclination for it when I've already
Yeah.
got two and I can only run two.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I think honestly, if I wasn't getting if we didn't have the fifth trooper and I wasn't getting things at, at a reduced price, I don't know that I would probably just get the commander pack. I wouldn't
Yeah.
really worry about getting, another ATST.
Well, we
I
still
don't
have
collect-
Tempest Force to be spoiled, which
Ooh.
is the Imperial Endor Battle Force.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what was there besides ATSTs and speeder bikes and scout troopers and stormtroopers? That's 4 units.
Yeah.
So maybe 3 ATSTs.
Iden's there.
Ah, yes, Iden and
Officially,
Inferno. Yep,
Yep.
from the
So,
video game.
Yep.
So ISF also, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be good. Iden ISF used to be good. You give it some new command cards, special abilities.
That's okay for me because I wasn't going to buy any of the Ewoks because I don't collect Rebels.
I have a feeling they're not going to. You only collect rebels? Is that what I just heard you say?
I don't collect Rebels.
Oh.
He played Empire Worlds.
Yeah, I was like, that's why this didn't make any sense to me. I was like, wait, did you borrow that whole list? Like,
I only play Empire and droids.
dude,
Same.
I get everything. So what was I gonna say? I don't think. I don't think they're gonna do any. I think they're just gonna come up with a battle force like they did for Remnant. I don't think they're gonna give you any updated cards or anything.
Yeah, but I'm saying there's some buff you're gonna get though, right? Because like Remnant gives you all these free aims and dodges. And I'm saying
Yes.
item bikes is already pretty good, and those are both things that were there. And so if you give that army some kind of
Yeah, that's fair. That's
perk, it could be good.
Let's give them more than 4 bikes and see if it's any better.
I would love
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Blizzard already has 4 bikes, but this is the bikes battle force, right? Like,
Yeah. So
if
let's give them
anyone
5.
gets
right. It made
ISF with
no
4 bikes,
sense for Blizzard Force, but it makes sense for this one. So do it again.
Yeah.
Just
do 4 and 4. I'll run 4 ISF and
Yeah.
4 bikes. Just to remove all the core, make it all Alpha Strike.
I honestly wonder if you did 4 bikes with no Vader in the list, it's going to be good, but I don't think it's going to be unbeatable good like Blizzard. I think you could still do 4 bikes.
I think you can. So, judging by what we've had over here in the UK, we've had going back to London Grand Tournament last year, we had a player with 12 activation Blizzard. So it was Veers, 4 bikes, 2 HRUs, and some snows.
Yeah.
He still made the top 8 and got his world qualifier ticket. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it to Worlds, but I think you can still easily make a day 2 with a list like that.
Yeah.
Because it's got the activations.
Yeah.
You're not spending 200 points on a Force user. And you're just
and if you had an Iden attack strike, right? Like that's something that
Tempest,
combos really nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it improves that alpha strike of 4 bikes hitting you.
Yeah.
What's worse? What's worse than 4 bikes? Having some ISF behind it.
Yeah.
But I have to say, 4 bikes is not the problem with Blizzard Force.
It's part of the problem.
I
but
think
you're
if
right.
it was only 4 bikes and the HRUs were more expensive and you couldn't take Operative
100%.
Vader, you'd have a much better, it'd be good. It just wouldn't be nigh
Well, if we want to talk
unbeatable.
about balance,
Yeah,
we
let's do it.
could switch topics.
Yeah,
That's
please.
a good segue.
Look at me.
Yeah, so as we're talking about what would fix Blizzard Force, I wrote an article, went out last Friday, where I did some stats and talked about the changes that I wanted to see. And so this article I did as a collaboration with Krzysztof Trojanowski. He's Polish, so I'm sorry. I know I'm butchering your last name. Before this, I was playing it through like one of those websites that translates and kept trying, but I was like, oh, no matter how much I practice, I'm still going to butcher it. But he helped me with this. He got all of the different raw data and prepared it for me, and I worked with him to get the different numbers that you see in the article. But the goal of the article was just to kind of take my experiences that I had at Worlds and playing different games and support it all with some data and make some proposals about what we should change. And so what I started with was the 4 nerfs I proposed, because I think people are often much more hesitant to be accepting of a nerf than a buff. I find that whenever you propose a nerf, people have a lot of pushback. So like, oh, you know, I don't want you to ruin these units. So even though I just talked about 4 nerfs, it's over half the article. Because I think if you're going to say knock something down a peg, you need to support it and then propose a lot of different buffs. But I guess we could start there. And so in the article, I ordered it in an order of importance, at least for what I think it is. And so the first nerf I said was we need to nerf double Dark Troopers. The second nerf was nerf Blizzard Force. The third was Black Suns. And then the fourth is Boba Fett. So we could start from the top if we want. So the reason why I put Dark Troopers at the top was they have the highest win rate out of anything in the game right now. And that's even despite impact going up a ton. So this didn't make it in the article because I didn't get the numbers till later. But essentially, we kind of talked about this on the last Scoundrels. But lists without impact were just getting completely destroyed by Dark Troopers. And I actually have the numbers now. I went back and looked. So armies that had 0 to 4 impact in the army, Dark Troopers have a 75% win rate against them. Yeah. That's with over 100 games. Armies with 5 to 9 impact, Death Troopers or Dark Troopers have a 63% win rate against them. And armies that have 10 to 20 plus impact in them, Dark Troopers still have a 50% win rate against them. So essentially, if you don't take against Dark Troopers, you're getting slaughtered. If you do, it's an even game. And that was kind of my point last week. But the overall win rate of Dark Troopers is 67% with 200 games. And this is just our double Dark Troopers. And so I don't know if that's really a hot take anymore to talk about, but at least from all of this and my own personal experiences, right? I brought Dark Troopers to a tournament and ended up winning my first time using them.
He's brought it up again.
Yeah. I just gotta mention it all I can since it'll never make it in the top 8 article.
Nope.
But yeah, so the 2 nerfs I proposed was removing defensive tech like Guardian and Force Barrier, because I think that those armies are able to skew against even high impact. And then the second one was bump up all their heavies by 5 to 10 points because they're also just too efficient. Because, for example, in my army, it was double bounty, double Dark Troopers. And so it wasn't abusing any defensive tech. But just by the fact of how cheap and efficient the Dark Troopers are, you could back them up with like a fully kitted Boba, a fully kitted Bosk, the whole 9 yards.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Go for it.
As a person who enjoys playing double Dark Troopers as well, with removing the defensive tech, is that not taking too much away? Because if you are taking barrier, then I'm also spending another 200 points. So therefore, there's nothing else back in the army. Because if I'm taking double Dark Troopers, that's already 400 points for my army. If I'm taking a Force user to take barrier, that's another 200 points again. So that's 600 points gone. And then I'm pretty much taking 3 naked troops. Now, I know it's still a strong list, but there is a barrier of entry of 3/4 of my army going into that tech, where with your list obviously you've gone only half of it. And I think when you take an archetype of a certain thing, so double heavies, double like melee skew or something like that, you tend to put 50% of your points into that skew. So is removing the ability that defensive tech affects them too much? I think the points one, I think you're spot on with, but I think removing the ability to use a protector or barrier or things like that is maybe too far as a devil's advocate.
Yeah, I think my main argument for is it for armies, especially that have low impact values, those additional things just remove more interaction. And so the thought is just making them more interactive. And I think kind of like you touched on, even with the 2 Dark Troopers and a Force user, I think you just remove barrier. Not many people were running barrier except in Palpatine. That's where you're really abusing it all. But essentially, like, yeah, you're not going to run barrier anymore in it, but I don't necessarily know if that was my kind of thought with Guardian is I think if you're focusing guarding Dark Troopers, that wasn't even the best strategy. I think it's just a very unfun strategy. So I would rather just remove it because there's a lot of new players who, right, they come in and they pump all this firepower and they're fully armored. They got Guardian Protector. And I think it's just kind of feels bad when you can't even touch them. And so that was kind of my thinking with that. If they have no cover, just knock away all the defensive tech.
Is that also that person not adjusting to the meta? Since we are a competitive podcast, that the meta changes and flows, that you need to adjust your list to reflect that. As you said there, you need to be bringing, what was the second bracket to bring it down 10, 20%?
You need, 10 or more impact.
Which I would, what's the numbers on critical in replace of impact? Because I think that would be
so all these count critical, but
so impact one is
you don't have critical in there. So these armies have some amount of critical, but 0 to 4 impact has a 75% win rate for Dark Troopers, so 25% win rate, and that's, you could have as much critical in there as you want. You'd still be in the 0 to 4 impact. 5 to 9, so it completely ignores critical. So there's some amount of critical in there.
But if you were building a list that is equal to taking like 10 critical, in some eyes, I think that is also adjusting for the meta, because you, with aims and stuff, re-rolling 2 dice, you're looking to get the 1 crit through, which is the same as having impact 1, right?
Yeah. So I think the other point with that is adjusting to the meta and one archetype warping the meta, because what this does is pushes out a lot of other armor. Like right now, ATRTs have super low win rates. All the vehicles, since Dark Troopers have come out, all the other vehicles' win rates have gone down. And so I think you're correct. As a competitive player, you need to adapt to these things. But this article, at least my focus is more on like what's healthy for the game than what you should do as a competitive player, if that makes sense. So it's coming from a little different angle.
Yeah, as I say, I was only playing the devil's advocate on protecting the archetype that I'm currently playing at a competitive level.
Says the guy who's been playing Double Dark Troopers for a while.
Yeah,
I mean, all the things I called for nerfs have been what I've been playing. I played Blizzard at Worlds. I've always played Double Bounty, so that's Boba Fett, and I just played Double Dark, so I'm calling for nerfs on all the things I currently play.
But I mean, if you rewind this, go on, Joe.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I think
way more important.
I like to think that. I think if we rewind it like a year or two to the other metas, I think there's always something at the forefront that is always going to warp that meta. So like with the Rexstar, it was the token sharing. We were always focused on that and how do you beat it. So the current focus is on these 4 things. So I think it's always justified. There's always going to be something at the top that you have to have an answer for. And as a competitive thing, you have to adjust. And sometimes that then has a negative effect. Like you say, ATRTs, ATSTs, you're seeing less and less of, because people are bringing 10 plus impact to deal with it. So
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, because I think I argue this all the time, and I can't remember what podcast we talked about this before, but like, how much is too much when you're adjusting the meta because of the things we don't know that are coming in the future, right? And saying,
this is literally the last cast.
Yeah, was it Scoundrels? Or was it
last Scoundrels? I think we talked on After Dark and Scoundrels last week.
Anyway, he doesn't listen to any other podcasts, so it's fine.
I don't even listen to these. You think I listen to these? I just cut off the front sometimes and the back, and I move on with my life and put it out.
He's been tuning us out the whole time.
The entire time. You guys start talking about numbers. I don't know. I'm sure people watching on YouTube can see it. My eyes just go glassy, and I'm just going, okay. I just think I'm all for adjustments. Sometimes I feel like we call for like too much, and I think the meta swings a lot without adjustments, and it kind of self-regulates. And so like I know that can sometimes be power creep, as Lucas I'm sure was about to remind me, but like I think there's other ways that it could self-regulate. Instead of maybe nerfing things, how could we buff things to bring them up and to make it more even, you know?
Well, I think that's why, at least for this, I only focused on 4 nerfs, on the things I think are currently the most overtuned, and I proposed something like 30 buffs. Because I think, like, not to rehash everything we talked about last week, if you want to hear it more in depth, you can go listen there, but I'll do a quick summary. I think of more the esports approach because, you know, esports are quite well balanced, especially compared to tabletop war games. And their approach is they just kneecap the few things overperforming and then regularly buff all the things underperforming. And so my dream is more regular updates where you just, because there's other units that are too good, but I just want to focus on the 4 that I think are, you know, a cut above the rest. So it's not comprehensive. It's like you just deal with the things that I think are really big issues, and then you bring everything up and you'll get close to that. And especially if we get a points update soon, right? That's a 6 months turnaround, which would be the fastest we've ever had for a points update. And so if they take that, you know, biannual update cycle, you might just need to nerf, you know, 2 to 3 things each cycle, and then you each time can buff 10 things, or, you know, even 30 things, even better.
Yeah. You know, listen, it's all good.
One day you'll join my side, Jay.
I don't think so. Just like, you know, I thought it's weird going to Ewoks and talking about meta, and then we'll transition into international meta. But like, I thought for sure I was going to be the only one that was going hard into like Ewoks, but based on our orders, that is not the case. Like people are going, and so I was like going to be like, well, if I'm the only one playing Ewoks, so be it. I'll just play it. But I think a lot of people are going to end up playing it. And
the Care Bears.
Yeah, I mean the interesting thing too is we have no idea what they're capable of, right? Like because we don't have the full picture yet, but like it's just I find it so interesting because things, and we've talked about this on podcasts before, like there's things out there or things to come out that a good chunk of the population can't read in between the matrix and see what that unit's truly capable of. And then you'll get somebody who comes along and just starts demolishing with something, and you're like, I didn't even know that was even good or a thing, you know? And so it's super interesting. And I just like keeping this conversation going, you know, about buffs and nerfs and how to keep this game alive and keep it playable. And, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's needed to continue the longevity of the game. Because if the game can remain at like a good clip that everyone's enjoying and you know, in the competitive scene, then it's just going to stay popular, right? And that's the thing that always brings over like 40K players and all these players from other highly competitive games is, yes, this game's competitive, but it's also easier to play, more, you know, there's more opportunity to play off meta lists and win. You know,
the game's more well balanced, which leads to variety. And then also the rules of the game, while simple, you know, a good example is chess. Chess has very simple rules, but really in-depth strategy because it's elegantly done. And so I think Legion, you know, I'm not saying it's like chess. It's a lot more complicated than chess, but compared to 40K, it's a lot more simple. But yeah, I think there's a lot more tactical depth as far as strategy in Legion.
I read an article, it's quite a while ago, on a slight segue, but it's great relevance to balance, is Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo, the original. So originally, like as a competitive, like at tournaments people would go to, like meetups and stuff, there was a clear S tier, A tier, B tier, etc. That game was released, I don't know, 20 years ago, whatever it was, released on the Nintendo. But what actually happened was, because people played it regularly and they always played the same thing, after about 10 years after the game had been out, people then found the counters to the original S tiers, and it was all the B and the low D tiers. It was the big fluff ball that swallows things, whatever it's called.
Kirby.
That's it. Yeah, Kirby used to be, originally when it first came out, everyone ranked Kirby as like the lowest tier available. Like it was absolute trash. Now, the game had received 0 balances since the day of release because it was on old cartridges. They didn't do balances and balance changes.
Yeah.
But then after people finally learned how to play and deal with what was around, Kirby then slowly, like, it shifted the meta without a balance, which is like as an article to read. I have to find it because I know Lucas likes stats. It's an interesting one to read, that with no changes, the meta still shifted on a competitive scene after years and years of repetitiveness. Not saying that will happen for Legion, but it's good that the meta shifts and changes.
In different games too, like Magic. Kind of, this is also us to what Jay was saying about sometimes people just see into the matrix and make something that there's a list. I think it was called Lantern Control in Magic in Modern. And basically it, like in Magic, if you played, you fight each other with monsters and you're trying to kill each other. This deck figured out a way to just like look at the top deck of their opponent's look at the top card of their deck, and the whole thing it would do is just check that. And if it was a bad card, like put it away. And if it was a card that didn't do anything, it would leave it there. And so like it didn't do anything. It started winning all these tournaments and got super popular until they had to like nerf this stuff. But all the cards for this have been around forever. But some guy just saw the matrix and this strategy where you just look at the top card of your opponent's deck and, you know, block anything good they can do. So those things can happen.
Yeah. There was similar with Magic. God, I think it was Standard we were playing, and just like all this crazy stuff was happening, and a buddy of mine like just was like, oh, and like made a land destruction deck, and then was like, well, you can't beat me if you can't play anything. And like his whole deck was just about like destroying the other player's land, and then just like waiting until they decked out. Like basically like just you know, and then they just couldn't. It was just crazy. But yeah, so I think you need both. I think what Lucas is saying, you know, I think you need nerfs and buffs, but I think you also have to only pull a couple levers or one lever. You don't have to pull them all. And I think that's a tricky balance for developers. You know, so anyways. All right, let's wrap up here with international meta. So we'll start with Andy. So Andy, kind of what is, in your like viewpoint, what's the approach to playing in the UK, and like how do you guys work on meta?
I think we're still on Blizzard is still like something you have to consider and be able to deal with. I think it doesn't matter where you are in the world. I think Blizzard is still the undisputed. But I think over here for us, it's more of playing what you know is the best thing. And I think Lila's obviously a great representation. Dave, obviously, again, repeats that. Myself, where I did 50 reps with double Dark Troopers. Okay, yes, I'm playing something meta. But when you look at matchups, I think, Lucas, you played against 5 RPSs over in Germany, and knowing how to deal with that matchup comes from repetition, because there was a 2-day event this weekend that I couldn't attend in the UK, but a friend of mine who went to Worlds, he took my list exactly, upgrade for upgrade, everything, didn't make a change, just said, your list is broken, Andy. I've played it a few times. It's amazing. I'm going to take it and table people. And I was like, go for it. And Jeff did take it, and he still did fairly well, went 4-2 over the weekend. But the lists that he came up against, from the description that I've received in conversation, it sounds like with repetition, he could have handled it. But on paper, like at a straight face value, he maybe didn't have the experience or knowledge on how to do with it. And I think that's always the most important thing when it comes to Legion, having the experience of what to do with your list. You could be playing, I don't know, the worst list ever, but if you've played Blizzard 20 times and you go, I've beaten them 12 out of these 20 times, you're on a positive win rate, and you know how to handle that scenario. Like, don't take hostage because you're rubbish at it, or all right, let's play hostage because I know how to deal with it and it's better than me playing bomb and run. They're the things that are most important with the meta, and you having a list that can compete with it. I think you still always need to deal with the meta in a way, or have an answer. But I think that's how a lot of the top tier players in Legion over here in the UK deal with it. I mean, I don't know what's for over in Germany and what's their competitive approach apart from lots of reps and boot
I mean,
camps.
I think it's very similar to that. A lot of the lists that are popular that came from Germany are now considered meta, but it was like Finn was the first one to play the rendition of Blizzard Force we all see. So it was always funny making fun of him being like a meta chaser, and he's like, I was playing this before. It was cool. And then so they're really big on speeders here in Germany. That's just a common thing. They really like their speeders. So I think a common thing in the German meta is a lot more players play with speeders. Like a good example of the difference between like the German thought and the American. Republic gun lines are popular in both places with Anakin, but like Timbo and a lot of the other North American players all do gun lines without speeders. And then all the German guys play basically the same list, but with speeders instead of, snipers or whatever they had.
Yeah, they take a triple barks. Is it Johannes, wasn't it?
Johannes, yeah.
Quite famed for the Anakin triple bark list and winning tournaments.
Yeah, because he's been playing it for a long time, even when Republic was a lot worse than this, and he was still winning stuff. And so that's something I was kind of saying. I remember when they came, they're like, "Oh, look, all the Germans are playing meta. They're all playing Blizzard Force and Republic gun lines." I'm like, "Well, they've actually been doing this for a really long time. Like Finn has been doing Blizzard Force since Blizzard Force came out in that current rendition, and then Johannes and Marcus and those guys have all been playing Republic with Barks, for years as well."
I think that's one thing. I don't know if it's the same for you, but a lot of UK players find that they want to play meta, but not meta. It's a very weird scenario. Like so a few players are like, "Oh, I'll take Blizzard Force, but I won't take optimal Blizzard Force." So obviously, like Jeff took to Worlds, he took the double ATST Blizzard Force. He always played double ATST, but a fan of like yourself, Jay, like that's what he's always enjoyed taking double heavies. But he found that obviously by abusing Blizzard Force, he could then have an order of 6 every turn of the game both of them would have an order on it, and that dictates a different style of play. So it's still abusing and going, oh yeah, I'm still running meta because I'm running Blizzard Force, but it's a slight twist on it, or because I was looking at running Vader with an ATST for Blizzard Force and not taking the bikes because I thought it was a good matchup in the mirror. And it's kind of looking at that mirror and going, well, if I'm facing the most meta thing possible, if I play that 7 times, because there's 50% matchups, then if I've got if it's in my favor, then surely that's a better list. But then sometimes you have to then look at the non-meta list and go, can I still beat it? And sometimes, unfortunately, it's no. So therefore, you have to change your approach again.
Yeah, I think people do that kind of for 2 reasons. One, as much as there is Legion fame, no one necessarily gets famous for just playing the meta and winning, right? The people who rise to stardom in the Legion community are often people who play something new. And so I think there's a little bit of like prestige and also being like, I want to say I won not playing the meta, doing my thing. And then I think there's also a side of it. If you're familiar with something else, sometimes it's better to play something that takes advantage of the current strong things like Blizzard Force, but using units you're more familiar with, because your familiarity with them, you'll perform better. So I think it works both ways. It works better for a lot of people because not everyone's Kyle where he can just, whatever the new best list is, he just learns how to master it and play it. But I think it's both things, Everybody wants to be the person that finds the new thing and gets to, stamp their name on an army, like Pink Suns or, people call it the Dave Grant list. They don't call it Palpatine Vader. So I think there's a little bit of that if you can do well with one of these lists, you get to stamp your name on it in Legion history.
Isn't it so interesting though? Like, it's funny when you have someone like Luke Cook though, because there wasn't really a lot of talk about how different his list was from the meta, but it's just like, oh yeah, Luke Cook won because he's the world champion. But I bet you if that was anybody else, right? Like how much talk would have been about how somebody came up and beat the field with an off meta list.
Well, I think it's
So
because that list has existed forever, right? It's like a gunline
A
with bounty
version of it.
hunters.
Yeah.
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 And
think-
so it's kind of a known quantity already, even though people thought other stuff was better. But
I think it's also pilot is very important behind that because
Yeah.
again at the same tournament that happened at the weekend, someone took that list, and he is a good player, very good player, because it came second. But the final was him versus Ollie Dyer. So and they played in the semi-final. So that for Ollie Dyer, that was a mirror matchup for him. Like he's already played that list. He's already played the experience of
Yeah.
losing to it. But this time round, Ollie's had the experience in this matchup. I know how to deal with someone who is very good with that list and how to beat it. But it's not Luke Cook.
Right.
Like you are talking like he said, like Chris played it very, very well. And he knows how to play the list, but there's still that next level where you know how to play a list, but then it's your list. You know how to play it. He's been playing it for as well since the last Worlds.
Basically.
Yeah.
I think it's also because when Luke shows up to an event, like since he's basically gotten top 2 and almost top 2 or better in everything he's gone to, right? He went to LVO, won it, went to Adepticon, got second, won Worlds, won this Worlds. I think also Luke is a known quantity. So whatever Luke brings, people would be like, it's good. Whereas
Right.
it's sometimes I think the things that blow up is when it's a name. Like obviously, like Lila was known in the UK as a good player, but she hadn't traveled, so the international audience had no idea who she was. And then when she comes out with an off-meta list, same with Dave Grant, right? No one international knew who Dave Grant was until he brought the Palpatine 6-act. Whereas Luke Cook is so high profile and known as a good player that he's kind of a known quantity at this point. So no matter what Luke brings, people are just like, oh, it's competitive because it's Luke.
Yeah.
But I think
Go ahead.
Go on. No, I was gonna say you go, Jay.
No, you go.
I was gonna say I think you could say the same for some of the other countries though as well. I think for me going out there, I was confident that I thought Germany were going to bring it home. Like I know Finn, Johannes, Marcus. Like if you look at the European Elo rankings, like the top 10 are most. I think there's like 2 non-Germans in there. So from a European point of view, where I've seen them come across to us, and we've had a few UK players go out to Germany events and stuff, and seen the high level that they play at. I thought that was going to represent in the world side of things, and obviously they did have a high transition into day 2, but then obviously they got whittled out slowly. So I think them being a known quantity for me, I thought that was a good thing.
Yeah.
But then obviously that doesn't always transition. Not to take things away from Luke Cook. I think I've played him myself online. I've not had the pleasure of in person, but online I think he's been a great player and made very, very few mistakes. And I think that's important.
He's someone that I think just learns so fast. Like he doesn't play that much Legion, which blows my mind. Like he goes to tournaments, but he plays practice stuff. Like preparing for Worlds, I was chatting with him and streamed it, and he's like, yeah, I've played 5 practice games leading up to Worlds in the last 3 months. And I was just like, what? Like, are you taking this more seriously? And then we had our practice game and I was playing Blizzard, and that was his first game as Blizzard, and I won it. And then at the tournament, he was like, oh yeah, I just thought about the mistakes I made in your game against me and didn't make those mistakes again. I'm like, so 1 game and you just mastered Blizzard and defeated all these top Blizzard players. Like he played 5 games or something leading up to Worlds. I'm like, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. He lost his first game and won the other 8. So
yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, like meta busting. And I don't really think Lila's list qualifies this just because it's so good. I just no one no one plays it. But I think there's opportunity out, and that's one of the biggest things with double heavy lists, right? Is how often have you faced a double ATST list, right? Or like my variation of it, which is with 2 dewbacks and then 3 like naked scout troopers, right? Like that you don't see that very often, right? So there's all this weird stuff that you can't really tech against, and that you're going, I don't even know what to do with this. And you know, and so there's something to be said about that. Like the surprise factor is definitely, but it only works so many times. And it's like, okay, so do I bring that to Worlds? You know, like play it as discreetly as I possibly can. Like try not to play any of the top players like Kyle or Luke or anyone with it, you know, but just try to get reps in locally and then bring it to Worlds and try to like just shock and awe people as I'm walking through stuff, you
Well, I
know.
know, like you said, you don't think Lila's list is one of those, but I think in a way it is because she found a list that wasn't popular, but was undeniably really good.
Yeah.
And she's a great player. And so all those things together, that really helped her out. Like
Oh
Kyle
yeah.
talked about this, right? In his game, he got super thrown off because he's used to playing Vader and he's a good Vader player. So Vader normally has no health or no wounds because he's hiding behind LOS blockers and he engages, you know, turn 3 or turn 4. He's not used to a bus flying out, dropping off a BSC on turn 2, half shotting his Vader, and now he has to play with the Vader at half health all game. And he was just like, you know, I misplayed my Vader after that because like I've never played against that. And then the list in of itself is really good, and Lila's a great player, and so it's like playing something off meta. I think Lila's case was a really good example that she was even throwing, you know, great players off, you know, their A game. And that game, I think if it was played properly, would have been close. But since Lila's good, the list is good, and she threw Kyle off. Like she kind of stomped Kyle. Like we all watched him get tabled.
And I guess what I meant by excluding her specifically was because of all those things, where I think you can be a great player and have a maybe suboptimal list, but you're very good at it. And you can then do the same thing that she did. But she's a great player with a great list that no one knew, right? And I'm saying like you could be a great player with a subpar list that no one's going to know because it's subpar, and why would anybody put these random things together and go really far just because you're shock and awe and if you're perfect at your list.
But what about going the other way where you've got the most optimal list and a great player, and you do something that's not the normal thing? Because Lila did that against me. So we obviously scrummed loads and played loads of games and practiced against each other. And in all of our practice games, she just tried to be mega aggressive and win by doing what she knew best,
right,
and what that list does best. And apart from in our game, she did the complete opposite. She didn't make a single attack. Well, she made 2, I think, across the whole game. That list is designed to table you, and like you've got no units left to do the objective. Where she just did the opposite. She would grab the objective and legged it. And it threw me off because I expected her to do exactly what happened to Carl.
Yeah.
Like his expectation was, I'll be fine. Like I don't expect this, and I didn't expect Lila to just do the objective.
Right.
So I think you can also do the opposite. Like have just throwing that curveball in there sometimes can be that defining factor to get you the victory.
Yeah.
I think especially for top players, kind of like you touched on, sometimes you throw in the curveball just because you know someone's good. And like, you know, in Kyle's case, I think it was the list he wasn't prepared for. But like in your case, like you said, just doing a play style that you're not expecting. So you're so drilled into, you know, this is how it's going to play out. I have to play exactly like this to win. And then they just do something completely different. And
I think
sometimes for a really great player, you can just throw them off.
I think we've probably played over 10 games to each other over the last 3 months with variations of each of our lifts. And I knew, and it started off exactly the same. I put myself exactly range 3. And it, like, spoilers for anyone who wants to play against this list, but the way to beat it is you put yourself at range 3, because with a single move, she can't shoot you. So therefore, she has no offensive output. Once you know that secret, the list isn't scary. But I mean, you need to have range 3 guns and beyond and have fire put. But as soon as that list gets close to you, it will rip you apart. So if you can mimic that, and I was putting myself, I started the whole game, I moved to range 3 and I set it, declaring it and measuring it all out, make my attack roll because I'm range 3, it's all I need to do. And she saw it coming. She's like, oh, well, it's going to be like this. Yeah, we've played this game 10 plus times and we've been at tournaments and like, you know, it's final table, me v her, and it's the same scenario over and over and over again. And then, yeah, you just do that one thing that's different. And I'm like, Oh yeah, I need to go into the objective that you've already started on. You've pre-planned and done that thing that I didn't think about. So, yeah. Objectives are important as well as better.
Objectives are important.
Yeah, it's just like an MCP, right?
Yep. I love MCP.
Oh no, don't get him started on MCP. What have you done, Andy? What have you done?
Let's talk. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, that's wrong podcast. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
I'll save that for after dark, everyone. All right. Yeah, I think this was a good cast. I think it's time to wind it up. You guys, it's late for you guys, so I want to make sure I get you guys to bed here. Guys, go to bed, kids. But anyways, yeah, thanks for joining us. It's real late for the boys, so I appreciate you guys being on. And if you want to hear more of the three of us and our wise crackery, you can sign up for Patreon and support the Fifth Trooper, and you can listen to a podcast about all kinds of insane stuff on After Dark. So, all right. Well, thank you. We are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Jay.
I'm Lucas.
And I'm AJ.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.